I'd like to begin by introducing folks and giving a little bit of an overview of the Hall of Fame itself. The mission statement, again, this is something that people need to be aware of if you haven't been to the Hall and you haven't heard it. The Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness field is dedicated to preserving, honoring, and promoting the tradition of excellence manifested by those specific individuals inducted into the Hall of Fame and through the history of outstanding services provided by people who are blind or visually impaired. Next slide, please. The Hall of Fame, and give a little background on how it's set up and structured so we can appreciate how we got to the point where we are tonight, is run by a governing board. It is an independent organization, not part of APH. Again, Tuck and APH are kind enough to allow us to use this venue to have the induction ceremony and provide space to host the Hall of Fame itself in the physical facility. But it is not a part of APH in terms of the facility, and it's not the APH Hall of Fame. It's the Blindness Hall of Fame, and it's something that is open to everyone. It's administered by a governing board, and the governing board has 9 individuals, has rotating terms. It's open for anyone to serve on. If you're interested in, please express your interest to anybody on the board or myself. It has its own set of bylaws. It works on its own budget, and it's self-supporting, and it's for the members of the blindness field in terms of the administration, selection, and working of the individuals for the whole process. Next slide. Currently, the 2011 Governing Board, to introduce myself, I'm Jim Deremeik, the chair, Kathy Eubner, Jane Erin, Janie Bloom, Mike Cole, Billy Brookshire, Diane Wormsley, John Maxon, Ann McCuskey, and our past chair has been Cay Holbrook, and Bob Brasher is the official curator for the Hall of Fame, as he is at APH, and he's really the man behind the scenes to help get things going and make the facility run in a very smooth operation. Thank you, Bob, for all the work that you've done in making sure things go for us. Next slide, please. It's hard to believe, but tonight we celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Hall. And to put this in perspective, I think we need to kind of look at where we are and where we are to other organizations. So, if we go to the next slide. We've often talked about the Baseball Hall of Fame. And if we go to the next slide, here we are in Louisville, Kentucky. Population roughly 700,000, where our Hall of Fame is located. And we have a plane that goes there. Cooperstown, New York, a little more challenging to get there. Population a little over 2,000. But very rich in history in their own right. Next slide, please. If you go back and you look at the Baseball Hall of Fame, it was established in 1936. Those of you that are real into trivia, if you can name the first players that are inducted, you're pretty good baseball folks. Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, Babe Ruth, Walter Johnson. Anybody remember the first group of Hall of Fame that we had? It was 32. We're not going to have them name them. First induction ceremony took place in 1939. You may ask why? Like us, they had the same problem. They inducted the people, but didn't have a facility to put them in. 3 years before the building was constructed to actually house the folks in the Hall of Fame. Sound familiar? We were just a little bit ahead of them. We were just a little under 3 years. In terms of inductees, currently there are 295 current Hall of Fame individuals. 195 of those are baseball players. Next slide, please. You may ask, what does this slide have to do with where we are? This is the 2011 inductees into the Baseball Hall of Fame, but there's a lot of mirroring looking at this to where we are. The individuals are Bert Blyleven, Roberta Alomar, and Pat Gillick. Bert Blyleven was born in the Netherlands. His contributions was here in America playing baseball. Very similar to what we could do in the Hall of Fame. You did not have to be born in America. You have to make your contribution in the North America facility to be recognized. Robert Alomar, Dominican Republic, played a lot of his baseball and was inducted as a Canadian for the Toronto Blue Jays. And Pat Gillick was on American recognition for his work as general manager for a number of different teams. So the similarity I point out in terms of when you look at some of the contributions, how things were set up and how we mirrored a certain Hall of Fame without even trying to. Next slide. So in 10 years, you look, what is the eligibility for the Hall of Fame? And you're going to see a lot, again, copying. You must have retired from the league for 5 years. They're elected by the baseball writers. But unlike the blindness field, the baseball writers have to have been active for 10 years. And they must be elected or selected on 75% of the ballots of those casting ballots for the baseball writers. Interestingly enough, like our Hall of Fame, they are not required to elect someone in any given year. 7 times when ballots went out, people were not elected. So, and in 2006, the largest class was elected. It was 18 individuals. The reason being, if you're wondering, that was the year that a lot of people who played in the old Negro League were selected, and there were 17 of them. There was one current ball player. Next slide. Hall of Fame's most popular members, when you go and you look at it, in the Baseball Hall of Fame, you do a Google, it's going to come up Jackie Robinson. If you go into the Blindness Hall of Fame, it's going to be Helen Keller. So we have some pretty notable company in terms of the individuals we're looking at. Next slide. So where are we? We started in 2002 in terms of the first induction. After 2001, it was actually proposed and conceived that we would have it. It was held right here in Louisville. Phil Hatwin did the emceeing for the night. There were 32 original inductees where vignettes were read and talked about, and they are our induction group. Remember, baseball had 5, we had 32, and we've been growing every year since. Next slide, please. The groups, like baseball, if you want to look at a comparison, are represented. And those of you who have not been to the Hall of Fame, you've missed a real treat. We have had a real honor in having an individual with severe talent in terms of copying detail of the individuals. Andrew Dakin. Andrew, would you stand and take a bow for the work that you've done on all 48 inductees? Interesting in looking at and researching this, baseball has had a number of people wouldn't comment how many people have worked and performed, putting together their Bas Relief Plaques that they use. We've had one and one company. Baseball has had one company manufacturer, but countless individuals have been composed in the sculpturing and the artwork. Next slide, please. Another part in terms of folks that have been very consistent, in terms of the biographies that you read on the Hall of Fame, the storyboard, they have all been comprised by 2 individuals, Dean Tuttle and Naomi Tuttle, and I think we need to give them recognition over the years for the work that they've done and continue to do with us. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the Hall of Fame, where are we today? To give you a quick overview, if you didn't get a chance to go on a tour yesterday, mark it on your trip next year, come in early, make sure you get a chance to do it. We're going to give you a quick once-over going through it. Here's your entrance right now. It's recently been renovated with the new welcome sign. Next slide. What you're going to see here is the kiosk. Why I have that here is we have just added a new kiosk. It's about 3 weeks old. We now have the capacity to handle 72 Bas Relief Plaques. And luckily, we were concerned that the company that originally made it would not have the individual to do it. And it matches perfectly. Those who have been there probably would know the difference. So we have 3 that are about 10 years old and 1 that's about 3 weeks old. Next slide, please. If you go through the Hall of Fame, you're going to see a description on what the Hall of Fame is. You go through, give the chance it's self-descriptive as you go through, and this will tell you if you don't have the ability to have a tour and self-guided. Next slide, please. And on this, you have the wall tribute, which will describe what happens in terms of honoring individuals and folks that we'll talk about in a minute. Next slide. Here's an example of the Hall of Fame with some of the staff from APH showing you with the backdrop of the individual columns that you could see where stones have been used to honor and indicate people that have made significant contributions that have been identified through purchase of a stone to help support the hall. Next slide, please. The Hall of Fame, when you look, here's a storyboard that recently was redone and most recently updated to include the 2011 inductees so that we have a complete individual story in addition to the biographies of what's been of our individual inductees. Next slide. The induction process, how does it work? Well, anyone is open to make a nomination. Nominations are open beginning in mid-January and go to the end of March in any calendar year. Nominees must be retired for a period of 5 years from their primary area of work, rehab, education, research, medical, whatever that area is, they must be retired. And the nominees are allowed to have up to 3 letters of support, and it's all done online. Next slide, please. The selection process. In any given calendar year, no more than 2 inductees may be selected into the Hall of Fame. Any exception to that would take a complete vote of the board, which would be 9 people to have complete unison vote. And it's free-thinking group, and it's going to be tough to do. To get that to happen because the quality has improved greatly over the years in terms of the nomination process, and we're just seeing a real increase and encourage people to continue the nominations. Should an individual not be accepted, they are carried over for a period of 1 year. Each nomination has a 2-year active life when it's submitted. And the governing board votes on the selection from the nominations received. No nominations received, no selection is made. So that's where the process comes from. Next slide. Hall of Fame facts. Again, we have 48 inductees. Rick Welsh, one of our original, not original, but one of our living inductees. Would you please stand and acknowledge Rick? Thank you for being here with us. Other interesting things that we know, again, I mentioned it's self-supporting. Currently fundraising, $262,000 has been raised by the governance committee in terms of directly supporting the Hall of Fame. APH was kind enough to forefront the money in the beginning to get it going, but now it's being self-supporting. There are 150 stones currently that have been purchased and up on the wall. Next slide. So support for the Hall of Fame. It's important that we continue this process to continue to honor our past and to preserve our future. So I encourage folks to take an active part in it. APH has been so kind to provide the in-kind donation, the space, and we have to keep this a self-supporting activity by continuing to raise the awareness of the Hall through participation and through solicitation of getting funds. Currently, we can support it through fundraising, and our main efforts right now are sponsorship of the Hall of Fame inductees, which we're greatly appreciative to, and through our Wall of Tribute. Next slide, please. And here's an example of this past year, one of our individuals that many people would know. This was done in terms of helping the Wall of Tribute, but more importantly, recognizing the work of Warren Figueroa, who's been, a dear friend to many people in the blindness field in the Louisiana area. So I encourage folks to take a minute to go back, think of people you work with, colleagues, get active in the nomination process of the Hall. And more importantly, take the next step and do it. Don't just talk about it. It's not going to happen unless you go and submit the nomination. The Hall of Fame is everyone's Hall of Fame. It's the blindness field. In addition, I strongly encourage people to recognize special events, special contributions, special mentors through that Wall of Tribute. That'll help to ensure a solid foundation and continued growth to the Hall of Fame. Next slide. We like to keep the Hall of Fame active. We like to keep it as an ongoing, changing event and continue to expand it. If you've got concerns, questions, please contact Bob Brasher, who is the curator, who will help answer and promote any information. The development office would only be too happy to help in soliciting funds and helping with the Wall of Tribute. Or myself, I will provide any information to help to keep the process going. Hopefully this gives you a quick overview and a walkthrough for those that haven't been to the Hall of Fame. But again, this is just a quick tour, virtual tour, and if you have not been, please go and experience the Hall of Fame. I had a neat experience this year. I took an individual that heard of the American Printing House, and we took the tour. She went past the Hall of Fame and said, I want to go back to see this. Had no connection to the blindness field and was totally impressed and awed by what the facility was. That speaks volumes to what our field is, and we as fields and professionals, when we go through there, the rich history and tradition will continue to grow only through the involvement of us as professionals to make it a more rich living environment.